Hello, class. This is Robin again with the Chapter 8 talk through for adolescent development, FHS 1230. And today's topic is identity. So, there are many changes that occur in different points in your life, and having an identity or changing an identity happens many times. Um, for example, you think about a midlife crisis, where you're changing and rethinking your identity. Children view themselves one way, and then they can change it depending on circumstances. Well, why is adolescence the time where we focus a lot on our identity development? One reason is, and this is a quote out of your book, one reason is that the changes in identity that take place during adolescence involve the first substantial reorganization of the individual's sense of self at a time when people have the cognitive abilities to appreciate how significant the change is. So, in other words, now at this stage in their lives, adolescents have the ability to look at the change and evaluate the change and see if it's something that they're happy with or something that they need to reestablish. You can change the view that you have of yourself. Takes a little bit sometimes, and you kind of have to know what you're doing. Um, and identity does not pop up only in adolescence, like I said, about 3 times. So maybe you want to keep track of that. And it can happen lots of times, but again, adolescence is where you can actually recognize what's happening and have a little bit of pull in which way you go. One example of when you change your identity self-concept is when you are younger than an adolescent and someone shakes their hand and says, "Tell me about yourself." You would tell them something like, um, I'm good at soccer, or I play the piano. I have 2 brothers. Things that are very, very concrete. Whereas, as an adolescent, if someone says, "Tell me about yourself," you kind of think, well, kind of quiet, but not always. Um, I'm a really good student. I pay attention in class, but I don't always listen to my mom. So you start to think of different behaviors in different situations, and what you actually say, um, kind of differs. But those thought processes happen. That there are different behaviors that can happen at different situations in your life. Let's look at the fun thing called the dimensions of personality. I don't know why that blue square won't go away, but that's okay. This is called the 5-factor model, and it has been changed and updated and all that stuff many times, so we're not even sure where it started. But there are 5 dimensions. The first one is extroversion. So how outgoing are you? How energetic are you? And you could test this, with a 1 through 10 kind of a thing, and think about how you are now, and then you'll look and see how you were, as a beginning adolescent, and see if you've changed at all. So extroversion is one part. Agreeableness. How kind are you? How sympathetic are you to the needs of others? How well do you get along with people? Conscientiousness is how responsible are you? How organized? How driven to get something done? It's my favorite one, neuroticism. How anxious are you? How tense are you? I read a book one time that said, stop now and take a deep breath and see if it relaxes you. And every single time I would read that, I would take a deep breath and realize that I hadn't been relaxed, and there I was reading a book. So that was kind of interesting. Openness to experience. Are you curious? Are you imaginative? And all of these dimensions of personality are interesting, and most of the scientists say, you might test out different parts, but that you end up with the same type of personality that you had all along. So, like a teenager will try out different things, but they usually come back to the regular one. This model has been proven valid for adults and teens and even people of different cultures. So if you kind of look at it in general, if you are an adolescent delinquent, I don't want to say naughty person, but delinquent, they score high on the extroversion usually and low on agreeableness and conscientiousness. And that kind of makes sense. If you're a high achiever, you usually score high in conscientiousness and high in openness. And so, you may want to just think about that a little bit. The good thing is we all get more emotionally stable and more resilient as we go through adolescence. So that's kind of just an interesting thing to do with yourself to see about your personality. Let's look at changes in self-esteem. So this arrow is kind of a timeline of adolescence, and the beginning of it, about between ages 8 through 11, whenever you start adolescence. Usually early adolescence is your time of low self-esteem, and you're kind of self-conscious about everything. I always think of junior high because I think I was the biggest goof then, and I didn't I looked like a nerd and everything, and I didn't dress that well. And so my self-esteem was pretty low. And self-esteem, thank goodness, increases as you go through adolescence. And by the time you're 15 plus, you usually have a more stable self-image. And I remember by college, I didn't even care what people thought. It's like, you don't like me, whatever. I'll just move on. But the good part is that it gets more stable as you get older. I think that's why junior high is such a difficult age to teach, because they're squirrely and developmentally they're supposed to be. One of my favorite theorists is Erik Erikson, and he came up with 8 stages of development, 8 crises of life that need to be addressed. And I'm just going to go through a few of them, the ones that you have already been through. But your test really doesn't need you to know the ones before adolescence. When you're an infant, this is from when you're born until you're about 18 months old or something, the crisis that you're going to attack is trust versus mistrust. Do I trust the world? Because I'm totally, as an infant, dependent on whoever my caregiver is. And if they take good care of me, then I build trust. And if they're neglected or their needs aren't met, then they don't trust the world. And later on in life, they have a lot of trouble trusting people. So if you have a problem with that, maybe look back. It's not saying, that your mother did it or your father did it or anything. It's just it wasn't developed at that time. It can be developed later. As a toddler, you are going through the crisis of autonomy versus shame and doubt. And if you think about toddlers, they always want to do stuff for themselves. Whether they can or not, is different for each child. But if you let them try to do things for themselves, you help a little bit until they can do it on their own, then you praise them a lot, then they learn to be independent and autonomous. And if you discourage your toddler or don't allow them to be independent, they might be ashamed and doubtful of their own abilities. A preschooler, their crisis is initiative versus guilt. And again, all of this is I want to do it by myself. I can choose what I want to wear. I can get dressed by myself. And if they're allowed to do that and praised for doing that, then they develop this sense of initiative. I can do stuff. I can take care of myself. If they're criticized, then they feel guilty. School-age children, I think that's about age 6 till about 11. You are learning to do things and be industrious. You're learning to work. You're learning to be competent and productive. And again, if you're praised for that, you will feel a sense of accomplishment. And if you are negatively praised or ignored, then you feel like maybe that you're a little inferior, that you can't do those things. Okay, and adolescence again is the one that we're going to focus on. And the crisis there is identity versus identity confusion. And this stage begins about age 12-ish to about 18. And that's when they say identity crisis. Well, because you're supposed to be establishing your place in the world. You're kind of getting ready to be an adult. You're establishing your goals, responsibilities, and you kind of know where you're going to go from here. If you're identity confused, it means you don't know what you're going to be doing, like for life, for tomorrow, laying on the couch and playing video games is not developing an identity. Um, and that's the one that we're focusing on most in this period of time. But notice that there is one for young adults, which is age 25 to about 40. And that's the intimacy versus isolation, which is where you're trying to find your partner, intimate partner, or and friends. But let's look more at the adolescent one. Um, you probably should evaluate yourself on, am I working on my identity? Is this something that I'm aware of? Or am I thinking, is this what I want to major in? What kind of job do I want to do? Do I want to get married? Do I want to have children? Do I want to be a pro baseball player? Or do I want to be a teacher? Those types of things. Versus, um, I'll just take any old class because I really don't know what I want to be, and I don't think that I want to work on it now. And they have things like um, where people like go into the service, the Army or Air Force or whatever, because they don't know what else they want to do. And when you run away from trying to get an identity, that's a problem. If you join the military because you want to join the military, that's not identity confusion. Okay, the one thing is you have, like, there's been different research on identity development and lots of theorists. You have Erik Erikson, Sigmund Freud, Vygotsky, Piaget are just a few. There are tons of them. But the one thing that most of them agree on is there some kind of a crisis or some kind of self-evaluation is necessary in adolescence for you to have a healthy development. That it's good to go through some sort of self-evaluation, some sort of looking to yourself and going, where am I headed? Sometimes identity takes a while to develop. It's not like you wake up one morning and you have an identity. It has to develop over time, and you might have one or more crises to go through before you find what you really want. It seems like they say that if you know you're looking for your identity, then you're on the right track. Whether you find it or not right away is not the issue. And that it's good for you to go through things to evaluate yourself. We don't have time, of course, to go through all of this, and you're probably saying, thank goodness, but know that development is a dynamic process, that human development, adolescent development, it changes all the time. The theorists change too, but as far as within yourself and your own identity development, you need to explore. You need to think about things, like I said before, career, having children, what your religion's going to be, what your occupation's going to be. Those are all very normal things to think about and stress about. during adolescence. Let's talk about ethnicity and identity. Here's a new vocabulary word called pan-ethnic. I had no idea what it meant until I went through and read the chapter. Um, Pan-ethnic is like a broad label to an ethnic group, like Latinos. Well, Latinos encompasses a whole bunch of smaller ethnic groups. Like if you're Latino, you could be from Mexico, from Spain, Central America, South America, all different places. If you say someone is Asian, that's a pan-ethnic label because you don't know exactly where. Are they Chinese? Are they Japanese? Are they Korean? Are they Southeast Asian? Or whatever. One of the identities that's growing is the multi-ethnic, which I think if you look back in your ancestry, most people are. But white people don't usually refer to themselves as white. Hi, I'm white. Where before you could say, hi, I'm Latino or Asian American or something like that. So white people usually just say, I'm American. And that's kind of interesting that I don't know if white people think they don't have an identity, but just in general, they're more concerned with that they live in the United States versus other things. Okay, let's look at discrimination. Have you ever been a victim of discrimination for whatever? And how did it feel? I grew up in Japan as a half Japanese, half American, and I was discriminated against for the American side of me. And that was kind of interesting after I came back to the United States to think now I'm being discriminated against because of the Asian part of me. So, but either way, it didn't really feel good when you're discriminated against. And if you've gone through that for whatever reason, because there's different reasons, not just ethnic, to be discriminated against, how did you feel? And sometimes the things that you perceive are different than what reality is. Let's think of a positive one. Since I'm thinking Asian, like all Asian students, all Asians are good students. Let's say that's what you're thinking. And so you meet someone new and you assume they're Asian, they must be a great student, but in reality, they may not be. And sometimes your perception is that everybody hates you because you're whatever, and in reality, maybe they don't. But if you perceive that your ethnic group is not seen in a good way, then you are very sensitive to the racial cues that are going on, and that you might expect to be discriminated against. I know sometimes I feel that way. I'm like, I feel like people, feel a certain way about me because of how I look, but it may or may not even be true. And so I'm sitting here expecting people to discriminate, and they don't, which is a very positive thing. Okay, let's look at identity and gender. How do men and women differ? Well, that is a question for the ages, isn't it? I like this quote within our book. Differences within groups of males or females are far more substantial than the differences between them. And I got thinking about that and I thought that is really true. There are lots of differences between different types of females or different types of males than the difference between females and males. Researchers have decided that mostly it's the physical strength that is the difference. That the rest of males and females have the same issues as each other, and so that they're more alike than they are different. There's a hilarious old book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and it talks about the stereotypes we have, that men are like this and women are like this, and you have to understand the other one. Instead, maybe we could think, that all people are from different planets depending on where they land and what they believe in. So this is the end of the chapter on identity. I hope I was clear enough with the things that will be on your test, and I hope you do well on it. Thanks. Bye.